Very good. Love the weather.
What?
Loving this weather.
I want to get like this.
More table tours. Felt like it was a very chill week. I was like, all my classes kind of, obviously, you know, like a lot of tests and stuff like that. Didn't have much work. Probably the week that was pretty laid back.
Yeah. Amazing.
That's how I got into my
What is your,
asked.
what do you do at?
So I'm designing feasibility studies as well too for the.
Oh, you got math too, yeah, that's right. I had math.
And just because.
And we had this test, and then I had English. That was, that's kind of cool. Like, as they,
Is it like using like
that's laid back. And
Aurora.
math test.
I know a little bit of Corel.
I actually ended up overstudying. I don't know which math you're taking, but
And AutoCAD.
when you go on the
That's always
MyLab.
kind of cool.
Yeah.
use MyLab, and all the practice questions or the questions on the homework. I was memorizing like the word problems and how to figure them out, stuff like that. The test comes out, it was so simplified.
I guess it was better.
Because my teachers told me,
Yeah.
the test they were like somewhere in between what we're
Because you would travel like.
not
shit.
the first questions, not really as far as like everyone
the
the
work.
work. Got the test was like on the front, I almost like threw myself a curveball because overstudied.
1 week.
You know, I mean, I didn't.
Okay, actually, we're doing like our cubes on fire, so we can do that. And so like I did it for 1 week. And then I was like, yeah, it's like, I don't handle any of like.
It shows you how
outside, I
I
make sure
works,
that
and I was looking at it, and you get a swimming pool, and I just
cartels
didn't
are
use it, but I
you know,
just realized
like doing
that they
business with
had
us
it
because they're
yesterday, and I was
sanctioned.
like, are
Yeah.
you
Sanctioned
kidding me?
individuals, and so
So
I
I've been
make
doing
sure
a
that,
lot
like,
of the things,
say
like,
you move out of my.
just trying to make it like a city guide, by just writing it down and stuff, and I'm just like, I wasted so much shit. And I forgot to
So like there was still a lot of that going on
But yeah, trying to
because
do
there's
the
a lot of.
parts, but, so today I just had like bare hand, so that's where I'm at.
Yeah, all right, that's roads. Yeah.
Yeah, so
My lab was
luckily,
so good.
none of the roads were shut down, so.
If you don't understand that question, you know, they give you 3 tries. You try once, get it wrong, and then maybe try again. You don't want to get it wrong the third time. You just look at the number, and then it shows you the section.
Security.
Something like
And I was just like,
1-6.
if I put them in my
You go
bag,
into the study
you guys
book,
are gonna get me in
you
trouble.
find that
for
exact question, and it'll show you.
Guys get me in trouble
So like,
for that.
if you got it wrong, you get practice on it.
Yeah, I noticed that, I was doing it like right before I got here.
Yeah, yeah, it's been 4 weeks, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm just like.
Yeah.
Market. I was going through it all today.
Yeah.
I
We were supposed to get graded for student. And then I submitted my whole, but it's not there.
But you would have already
Yeah,
taken your
I
test
think it'll, like,
already,
read it.
or you haven't taken it?
I'm taking it tomorrow. Yeah, so. But I made sure it was in the afternoon, so it's not, it's not the same.
Right.
Kind of figured out, John.
Are you taking that seated or?
Ooh, Java.
You can't do it online, it has to be seated.
Oh, man.
Oh, I think
I
the
mean,
words that I'm using are.
I didn't know if you could take that online or not. I'm doing it
It's so
seated
funny,
as
cause
well,
like,
but I wondered if you could do it online.
Not a whole lot,
It's called
and
Dr.
now we
Is
can
what
do
you
it
can
like
do
that
online.
this week. I'm
But
thinking, I'm
they
like,
said that they
wait, I
don't
can
have
all
it
this in one
available
line,
for.
like,
Yeah,
that's
like
insane.
Java, like
Java's
10 lines, like my code is so long,
Getting so much done in just one line, like, that sounds pretty awesome.
right? I didn't know you could do it in Python. I'm gonna actually research that tonight. So, that means I have to redo it. I just.
Well, I think there are translators.
I know, and I seen that Brody wasn't in. I don't know,
So,
like,
to
was
make
he
a
the one?
lot, well, I'm using JS Studio.
Yeah, you get that message.
Java.
No.
So
And I
I'm using JS
figured that they were just
Studio.
talking
You don't have to
about
write
that
the code, but
student
you have
that
to
hadn't
link it
been here in a
to
while.
your, right now I'm using
Because she was mentioning
my
there was somebody
computer
that
is the server
did
for
show
it,
up with
so
the,
it's linked
but wasn't
to
really
Java,
inside.
it's just linked to Discord.
Okay, gotcha.
so that's
Can't
what I
write
thought.
anything in Discord.
Missing like half the class today.
Starter.
I'm like,
Like,
But
was that-
they're translators.
I like it, and I worked, and I was like, oh, no, it's Brody.
To.
He was the one.
And like, say, like, see,
Hopefully
yeah, I was
nothing
looking at
bad
some of that stuff
happens.
today.
It's nice.
And Like, good decision, would that may just be more work than our group, at least, we're pretty spread out.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys, help me. You all got that email, so you know now how important it is to do this attendance. Because I can tell you that based on our attendance, the person that we received the email about was not in class last week. So it has been 2 solid weeks since that person was here. So that means, boy, my attendance better have been accurate that that person was really running remote last week, right? Because we're all like, whoo, that's a good one. So help me, keep helping me with it. In order to try to facilitate this, you guys are all here, but I'm going to tell you about it like you're not, because I'm hoping those people that are home are listening. In Zoom, you can update your name. So I could click up here on my picture and click the 3-dot menu and rename myself. So our people that are at home, if you guys would add like -remote or something after your name so that all of us could look at the participants and know if you're here or not, that would help tremendously. We have more people in this class that are working remotely than I do in any of the other classes. Plus we only meet once a week. So we are just like really putting our nails in our you-know-what. But actually you guys are doing a great job. So it's working out. Let me see if I've got this right. Let's see. Okay, so back here then. Are you Zach?
Yes.
Okay. So you're here. I'm going to mark these other people absent because I haven't heard from them. So it looks like our attendance is rough, but actually we have a lot of people that are doing things online and keeping up. So it's kind of like, I feel like trying to hit a moving target here. Brody. I think we're good there. I'm going to save that, and then if anything changes, we'll work on it. But I mean, I think that it's right, because this is the kind of environment you guys are going to be going to work in, right? I mean, it looks like we're probably going to have, you know, some people that are there some days and people that are working from home most days. So I guess we'll get used to it and we'll figure it all out. How did you guys do on the assignments? I hadn't looked to see if everybody got things turned in. Should I go look? I'll go look before I say anything, and then I'll see my happy face or not. Oh, everybody did great. We have hands-on exams turned in all up and down the row. So good job. So we're done with our first unit, and you guys took that terrible exam right in stride.
I didn't notice when I was using it.
Oh, I don't.
So when I added it, I must have got the questions wrong. I'm like, how did I get wrong? I'm like, it's so easy. I looked in the notes, I was like, oh, it's 126. I mean, 128. Yeah, they had 128.
Yeah, I actually had this with me, and I just looked on this.
Oh, good, good. I went in and switched it. I'm like, oh, Roy's gonna get it.
Okay, I want to get to my week 5 stuff in Canvas, and it's not letting me because I still have some things in week 3 that I haven't finished up. So remember, go to your modules and let's click those buttons and say that things are marked as done. And I believe with this week 3 module, there are a couple of things that are marked as student must view. Oh yeah, like how to get your free software. That one's set to say you have to view it. So if you hadn't just looked at it, it'll complain. And then getting Office 365 is the same way. So I'm just going to next through all that. Then I'm going to go back to my modules and see if I have anything left. It looks like I do down at the very bottom. the summary thing. And I know you guys are marking them as you go, where I'm just getting in student mode once in a while and looking at it. So I'm going to roll up all of these modules that we're done with so I can get to week 5. We're going to get started. But before we do, I almost forgot. This is important. Oh, wait. Well. Hang on, let me get logged on here. Okay, so I don't know if my sound is working. You might have to fiddle with it, but if everybody's got their Zoom session going, that'll help you a lot with this one. So let's go to www.kahoot.it and then type in this game pin. I'm going to switch it to a different speaker here to see if we can get a little bit of noise. We use our little. Sometimes with the Kahoot, I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. Sometimes I'll have a Kahoot that I don't expect people to know. Sometimes they remember it. Like, we're getting there. We have about 10. We'll have to put them online at home joining us too. So hopefully we'll have more than 10. It's on the other class we had, but you always delayed. In that we could have a class like that, there's always one person who's just got to wait for the class out to run out. I'm trying to give an appropriate punishment for that person. If anybody thinks of anything, let me know. We won't have that person in our groups. I don't know where our online people are, but they're not in our Kahoot. So it would appear that they're not actually attending online people. We can do someone that they can see it. I'll share my picture so you can see it. You guys see it now, online people? Like griping at them and they couldn't see it. Yay, Jesse, thanks. Oh, you did, Jesse. Everybody's doing so good, trying so hard. Okay, we're just go ahead and start. But at least I have, oh yeah, Jesse, you have it shared. You have the code snippets in the Kahoot. That's why I say it works a lot better to have the Zoom session going, because it can be really hard to keep the code. Okay, what is the Python program named after? Oh, majority of people, good job. I would have said, no way, when I first started with Python. I didn't believe that. I guess they were having a good time thinking about a programming language. And he's got it started off so good. What's the Python function to output data? guys haven't done a lot of Python code on this one, right? Good job. Okay. Oh, we had a change there. Good job. What will the following code produce? Right. I'm sorry, I was chatting over here with these guys and I didn't see you just awesomed that question. That was really good. I don't think I've ever seen that before. Okay, so it's a speed war. Here we go. What will this code print? Oh, good job. Got a battle going here. What will this code print? It's too far away. It's also pixelated. Oh, no. Oh, it tricked you.
Yeah, but cat.
That variable name was cat, but it had the value dog, didn't it? Tricking you. Oh, Jesse took over on that one. What will the code like that print? Now you did not let it trick you there. Very good. So with Python, if we're working with a string and we multiply it, we'll print it that many times. But if we're working with numbers, we'll get the answer. Very good. Oh, Jesse's got it. Stay in there. Which line of code would print 3, 2? Very good.
Oh, jeez.
Do you notice how in this Kahoot, oops, I went too fast there. What will the following code print? I'll get back to that. Ooh. Okay, now, wait for it. All right, Andy is taking it over. Is that Jesse, JW? 3 in a row. We have like 3 JWs. What is a string? Can't trick you guys at all. Can't get anything past you. Oh, you're just keeping that. Though. Last one. Which data type only returns true or false? Oh, very good. Dang. Let's see. 9 out of 10. That's amazing. 9 out of 10, just a little faster. And 9 out of 10 even faster, yes. What? Good job. Yes. Very good. That's great.
closed it. We didn't have any other people that tried to make it go flat out.
Why would you do that?
Well, there was one question I was like in the middle of the reading and it was like,
It's already going.
didn't read the funniest.
So this week, we're going to really focus on Python. You guys have got a chance to get in there a little bit and create just a little bit of code, but we want to give you a chance to really do a little bit more. So this week, your Prelude to Programming book, we won't really be referring to it very much. So we'll go back to it to get, I think, that supermarket problem so that we can write it in Python code. But other than that, we won't really be referring to our books too much at all. We will a little bit today. So we're going to work on getting our Python skills going. I want to find that textbook, that Python Programming for the Absolute Beginner book. If you have it with you, you could open it up, but if you don't, that's okay. Let me bring up mine. One thing, if you have good, my view is not right, so it gets me confused. If you're got some strong Google foo, you might be able to go out there and just find you a copy of this book. And if I told you where it was, then that would not be legal. But you might be able to find a PDF out there online. I know it's a cheap book. And you guys did a great job going through this first chapter. You saw that idle comes with Python. Just by installing Python, you were able to get to that little idle editor. All idle did was let you type the code, right? It also lets you run your code. So it's a little bit more than Notepad, right? But not a lot more. I mean, we could still run our programs and do all those kind of things that we want to do. I'd like to start on chapter 2. And in chapter 2, the first program that they have us work with is that game over program that you started in chapter 1. Now, we're working with different computers though, and you guys saw already at home that getting Python installed can be pretty quick, pretty easy. But it can also be a problem because we can end up with so many different versions. I'm sure you've seen that already. There are lots of different versions of Python. There are lots of different installation options depending on where you get the install file from and things like that. So we're going to see that right away when we start trying to use these computers. So let's see what we can find. I want to find idle. Remember that little editor. Now, if I start on my Windows Start menu and start typing idle, it does find something, but sometimes, I don't know about you guys, I would expect it with you guys especially. You're learning so many new things and so many new terms. There have been many times I couldn't remember what idle was called. It's like, I want to use that thing for Python, but I'm not exactly sure what it was called because I'm learning 57 different things. So you could also type Python at your start menu in your search bar, and it'll come up with the different installations of Python, and you can see your idle installs. Now, the versions I have installed on this computer up here, I have Python 3.7. Does anybody else have one that's like that, 3.7? A few of you, some no, have some different ones. Well, yesterday, we were looking at all of these different versions, and we went ahead and we just grabbed that install file from the announcements that I sent out to you guys. And we just installed it on all these computers. Of course, there's not people at every computer in here, but on all these different computers. And even after we did that, we still had some differences. Like some people up here in the front, especially, I want these guys to know, when they had errors in their program, it just wouldn't do anything. It didn't tell them there were errors, but it wouldn't run it. Things like that can happen with our Python installs. Things can get a little bit messed up. So we're going to jump away from idle. Idle is the default editor that comes with Python, and I want you to remember that. If you're ever in a situation where you need to write some Python code in an emergency, you can use the idle editor and everything will be fine. So let's write our very first program using that idle editor. If you don't have the same version as me, that's okay. Let's use the version you have. I'm going to open this Python 3.7 version. Now, when you open idle, the first thing you get is this Python interpreter, the Python shell. At the top, in the title bar, it tells you what version of Python you're running. The main thing we want to make sure is nobody's running anything that starts with version 2, like 2.7. Everybody's higher than that, aren't they? We want to make sure of that. Now, when I'm looking at this shell, I'm basically, like I said, looking at the Python interpreter. I could type commands like print, hello, world, and they'll run. So this interpreter shell is actually going to run Python commands for me. That'll work just fine. But it's got all this other stuff in there, and I can't just like save my code. So you guys should have seen from that very first chapter, but it was kind of hard to follow. So most people saw it, but some didn't. You want to actually create a file. So you want to go to File, New File. And then when you have a new file, you're ready to start typing all your Python code there so that you have this source code file that you can run over and over and over. At the Python interpreter, that Python shell, I'm just typing things interactively, just this one time, one shot. And so I'm not really having an opportunity to save my code like I can with idle. Okay, so I have a new file. This is going to be a Python source code file. Let's go ahead and save it. I'm going to save my file on my OneDrive. I have a folder for the 120 class. And so I want to just save my file in my 120 folder. Now I'm going to name this thing Chapter 3, even though it's Chapter 2 of our Python programming book. We're in Chapter 3 of our Prelude to Programming book, and it's kind of our controller. So Chapter 3, Python game over. Now, whenever I save my file, when I click save, it's going to save it as a .py file, and .py is the default Python file type. In older versions of idle, it actually didn't do that correctly. So if you ever get a Python file and it's not color coding it properly, it might be that it's missing the .py extension. I'm going to go ahead and click save. And now in our idle file menu window, we should see our file name. It's really long. Now I'd like to get started with that game over program, but the first thing I'm going to do is write some comments. So I want some header comments at the top of my Python program. So I'm going to use the # or the hashtag character to start a comment. The first comment I'm going to write is what this script is. And this is going to be our game over script. And then I'm going to put the developer name, and I want that to be you. And we started on 9/22/2020. And then last, I'm going to put a purpose in, and this will be Python intro to strings. So if I were writing a program for business, I would put what the business purpose was of this program. So the hashtag character, the #, gives me a single line comment. I can also do a whole bunch of comments, like a block comment, and I can do that using 3 single quotes. So if I do 3 single quotes together, and then I can say, here is a block of comment lines, and then when I'm done, I can do 3 more single quotes, and that'll give me a comment block. Either way is fine. And as we write our code in class, I'll kind of switch back and forth. I kind of think that 3 quotes look better for our header documentation, our header comments. You'll see a lot of different people use that for important stuff. So whenever we're looking at a .py file and we start out with commenting right away, we can see some color coding. Our single line comments are going to be highlighted with red, and then our multiple line comments are going to be highlighted with green. So Python just makes it look all Christmassy, make it all happy. And that's when you can always tell it knows what's going on because it's getting all Christmassy and pretty. All right, looking at our book then. Let's see if I can get this over here to the side. We've got this game over program, and we started out with a print statement that printed out program game over 2.0. So this will be a little bit different than that first program game over that you wrote in the first chapter. Now this is my first line of code really in here. So I'm going to go ahead and run this to test it. Make sure I don't have any typos or anything. So I'll use my run menu and run module, or I could press F5. Click OK to save and run. Now in the Python interpreter window, I'm going to see the output there, my game over 2.0. Some interesting things about that one line of code. Let's take a look at it. Print is a function that we're calling, a Python function that we're calling. We're sending it information within our parentheses, and the information we're sending it is what we want to have printed. And in this case, we're sending a string. And our string is any sort of value that's enclosed within those double quotes. But we saw from the Kahoots, they had some strings that were in single quotes. Python doesn't care. Single quotes, double quotes, whichever one you want to use as a string, it's fine. It's like, okay, I can handle that. But now here's an interesting situation. We have this whole string within double quotes, but we have some single quotes right in the middle. And it doesn't care, does it? It doesn't, because it's like, those are just part of your string. I'm not going to worry about them right at this point. I'm just going to print them out, which is very nice of Python and not what would happen in other programming languages. By the way, they would be very mean about it, but Python is nice. Okay, so let's keep going and think about some other things we want it to print. The next print line, they want us to print multiple words. So same, and then a comma, and another string with the word message in it, and then another string with the words as before. This example should also print on one line, and we should see all 3 of those strings. Let's run it and see. Sure enough, so our first line prints on a line, and then our next print statement prints out all of those words just like they were one big string. So they just want you to notice how that's not making any difference. Having the comma in between those words is making Python put a space in between them for us too. So it's taking care of that spacing for us. Now, another one. In this print statement, we're just going to format our syntax a little bit differently. We're going to use the word just, and then after our comma, we're going to press enter to go to a new line. And we're just going to make this code more readable. Some people like it this way better. So finally, when I'm done with my last string, I close it with my double quotes, and then I close my parentheses to close all of the parameters to my print function. Now, if I run that, is it going to print on multiple lines, or is it going to put all 3 of those strings on the same line? I clicked on the wrong thing. I should see my first print, my second print, my third print. So notice how each time I use the function print, Python moves to a new line to output that data. That's an important point. Now another one, print again. They want us to print the word here, and then at the end of it, they want us to add a space character. We're not going to be able to see that, but that's okay, because this is showing you how to take care of a space character. Because what if you want to initialize a string to be a space? You could use double quote, space, double quote, or if you want to clear something out. So that's how we would use a space character. So let's run that again. So here we see that. And then there is a little space there. So it did put that space character at the end after it output. And just a couple more. Next. We're going to get some excitement going. We're going to print out that game over message just a little bit bigger, a little bit better. And here it is. Okay, let's print it. Now, what they want us to print is a multi-line string. And in a lot of programming languages, we would have to make special considerations for that and change it up a little bit. But in Python, we could put 3 double quotes, 3 again. Sometimes they just are like, all these other programming languages use 2. We use 3 to mean something completely different. So I'm going to have 3 double quotes, then this really long string. Here's our string they want us to use. That's fine. I'm going to copy it and try to send it to you in our chat. So let's see how that goes. Now it mangles it a little bit. Can you get it from the chat, or is it just mess it up really bad? I might have to put it in Notepad or something. Make sure to add a closing parenthesis at the end.
You just have to add spaces and stuff to fix it.
Oh, so it's not too messed up.
No,
Okay.
I did it at home and I was just having to put spaces.
You fixed it all.
Yeah.
You're so good. I started and then I was like, no, I'm going to print it this way. Now, it says game over. And like she said, if you space it out a little bit, you can make it all perfect. It's not too messed up. But after the 3 double quotes to end this giant multi-line string, we need to close our parentheses for our print statement.
It doesn't show up after.
You're not seeing it?
Like up there, like you gotta get that line in space here.
Oh, you're
And then
almost
you have to
there.
like.
Let me just send a file.
Yeah.
I think I had it in a file.
But you have to like scoop after each character, you have to add like 1 or 2 spaces. It's not just. And it's just going from like the top.
Oh, I do. Here it is. Why are you not working? It's in meeting. I see why you guys didn't get it. I sent it to everyone in the waiting room, and you guys are not in the waiting room. Now, there's the text, and there's a file. So now you should see it. Do we actually have people still in our waiting room? We don't, so I just sent it to nobody. Okay, good. All right. Okay, so if you have to fix it, you should consider yourself an ASCII artist, because this is ASCII art. And remember from the very first or second week when we looked at binary, I showed you the ASCII code table, ASCII code being anything that the computer can print. And back in the day, before there were graphics, people would spend hours creating this kind of ASCII art, this character stuff. So our textbook mentions it, and some other textbooks really expand on it. But there's all sorts of cool examples online if you want to look, if it's something that you find interesting, because it's a great way to practice things. And like, if you Google search it, let's say ASCII art, some that are really surprising are like the Wikipedia logo is an ASCII art. And so there's all sorts of interesting ones. Now we got Jennifer Aniston. Man, people are getting crazy, so much more than there used to be. So you can try whatever you want. What I like are the little teeny like houses and things like that, just so you can try getting things lined up on top of each other, you know, spaces and stuff like that. Sometimes as developers, we have to count spaces, and we're reluctant to do that. But sometimes that's just what we gotta do. Okay, is it working? Are you printing game over, or is it gotta be perfect? No, what's it doing? Why are you trying to save it in program? So go someplace else. Where do you want to save it? You're trying to save it to the program. And you're on some weird computer. I think you're on my computer. Now this. And in your textbook, they actually give you all this. Now, you need to close the 3 double quotes, 3 more double quotes. Perfect. And then close your parentheses. Now try to run it. Now try to show what are these 2 parentheses? So then it knows that it's a line. Go ahead and run it. Getting it? Are you fixing it? You two are just kidding. You're gonna have to send it to me when you get it good, and I'll keep it forever. Whew, yay. Okay, so this is one of those things that is really cooler if you've learned, if you know a lot of other programming languages, because then you're like, wow, Python just handles that so well. I didn't know that was a thing. So that's handy.
Miss Riley.
My stuff. Okay. So in our game over program, they want us to write one last line of code, print, and oops, not print, input. They want us to use that input statement where they have \n, press the enter key to exit. And you guys saw that in chapter 1. The backslash indicates an escape sequence. It means something special to the computer. \n means go to a new line. So just the same as if we had an empty print statement without any data in our parentheses, that would go down to a new line. That's what the \n does also. So I'm going to run this. And I should just see that final message at the end saying to press the enter key to exit. And of course my game over ASCII art is all messed up, but that's okay. And I'm going to press the enter key to exit. Now, if you guys fix your ASCII art, like I said, it's just a really good practice of seeing how things are lining up as you're printing them out. Okay, let's save that one. Let's close it. We're done with it. So good.
Can you hear me?
Let's create a new one. I'm going to create another new file. When we're working with idle and the Python interpreter, we can go all the way back to the interpreter to create a new code file, or we can just do file new from the one we're in. A couple of things though about Python. When we're running our Python program, it's a script. And a script means it's a series of saved commands, because each of these lines of code I could run at the interpreter's command prompt separately if I wanted to. So that means it's interpreted code. If I were working with C++ or a language like that, that kind of language is compiled. That means I run a process and it takes that code and converts it to machine language that can be executed by the processor. When we're working with Python, that's not the case. The Python interpreter has to read our code and figure out how to execute each line of code. So that means Python is an interpreted programming language versus a compiled programming language. And that's why we see things like C++ being used for game applications and things like that that require the most intensive speed we can have, because a compiled program is always going to execute faster than an interpreted one. So that's a little bit of a Python drawback. We're seeing, though, with the speed of processors in our modern systems, that it's not as much of an issue as it used to be. Because way back with slower computers, a slower programming language was a problem. But now that computers are so high speed, we're seeing Python used for all sorts of scientific number crunching calculations that would have normally been something that was done with a compiled language. But just so you know that difference. I can't speak today. Okay, so moving on in our textbook. There's a lot of really good information in that Python programming text about the different strings that we printed for our game over program. They talk a lot about the double quotes, single quotes, and the triple quotes. So great information for you. So let's do this second one then. I'm going to say File, New File. And I'm going to close my game over program. Now in my new file, I would like to save this. So I'll save in my Python folder, and I'm going to name this one Chapter 3 Fancy Credits. And I'm going to start out with my comment block. This script is Fancy Credits.
You said we could use either the triple quotes or the hashtag.
Uh-huh, yeah. And our purpose here is we're going to experiment with escape sequences. We saw that \n, and I said that backslash is our escape character. Whenever the Python interpreter sees a backslash, the interpreter's like, wait, something special is going on. I better check to see what the next character is to find out what's going on. It's kind of like an alert signal to the Python interpreter. So if we have backslashes in a string, we can have an invalid string because that escape sequence can cause us some trouble. So in their Fancy Credits program, they want to print a bunch of backslashes, of course, just to be problems. So let's try it. The first print statement they have print \t, 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 So we're going to do 3 tab stops, 3 tab characters. Then after our tab characters, we're going to print out the words fancy credits. Now let's run that and see how it looks in our output. So you see, it didn't just start over here on column 1, it tabbed over. Let me make this thing smaller. This interpreter window is never easy to work with to show you guys. Down. I think I can type something clear. None of those things. Okay, so anyways, it prints out 3 tab characters. So notice the escape sequence, that backslash character, makes the next character be ignored because we don't see a bunch of T's. Now, one other thing too with backslash and forward slash, make sure backslash is above your enter key, forward slash over on the other side of the keyboard, backslash leaning back, forward slash leaning forward, because when we're programming, that backslash and the forward slash are very different and have very different functions. Okay, the next line of code they have for us is another print statement. And here they've got 3 tab characters. Then we have a space and 2 backslashes. And then another space and 2 backslashes. And we keep going till we have what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 sets. So for each backslash that we have, that's an escape sequence, the next thing is a backslash. So we're saying, go ahead and print that backslash. Let's run it. So we should see 7 backslashes is output. And sure enough, we see our 3 tabs, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So notice how we have to have 2 backslashes to get 1 to print out, right? If we just had 1, try just 1. Let's run that. You'll see Python will say, I don't know, I don't know. It crashes. Now, what's it saying to me? It's saying EOL, is that what it is? EOL while scanning. Yeah, it says, I was reading through your input, scanning it, and I ran into the end of the line before I thought I should. So something must be wrong. So that's not a very helpful error message, but that's the kind of error messages we get. So we know that, oops, something isn't matched up here in this line. So if I look at it, I see, oh, I only have 1 backslash there. So I'll put my other one back in, and now I should be able to run. Now, our textbook is just kind of showing you guys some really unusual things here with this program. So it's kind of nice because these are sort of gotcha things that if your book doesn't highlight to you, can be a real problem on down the road. So it's kind of nice that it's showing us all this stuff today instead of later when we have trouble. Okay, so we got a bunch of tab characters. We know if we want to print a backslash out, we have to have a backslash in front of it. Let's do another print statement. This time, they want us to do 4 tabs. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then they want the word by. Now, when I close my parenthesis, notice how idle sort of highlights that whole string. So it gives you that feedback that you are complete. Let's run this so you can see where that shows up. There it is. So we're building it slowly. Now we see fancy credits, all our backslashes, and the word by. The next line, we want to print 3 tabs, and then our author's name is going to be Michael Dawson. I'll run it. And I should see that I'm slowly building this nice output of credits. Now I've got my author's name there too. Now after the author's name, they would like 1, 2, 3 tabs and like 7 backslashes. Didn't we already do that? Let's copy it. I'm going to copy this line of code and paste it down here. Now, as a beginning programmer, beginning with this language, that's a really risky move, right? Because if you do too much copying and pasting, you're not going to learn anything. So you never copy and paste unless we're working something like this, where you just typed that line of code, you know how to do it, you know what's going on with it, then you can copy and paste it. Let's keep our masks up over our noses, please, everybody. Remember, we had a person that was positive in our room. I'm seeing a lot of noses. Now, we'll go ahead and copy that line because we've already printed it or we've already typed it. But as a coder, if you don't get used to typing in the code, it's really not doing you any good. So even as an instructor, if I'm looking for an application that I want students to do, and I find something, ooh, this is interesting, this looks really good, I see this application that somebody else has used, I have to make that same decision. Am I going to just copy and paste it and assign it to my students? Or am I going to actually develop that application looking at that example so I know what's going on? Guess what I have to do? I have to actually develop it if I want to be able to teach people how it works. Otherwise, I'm just kind of guessing. And that's what happens with new students. If they're already really advanced programmers and they're learning a new language, then maybe they can do some copying and pasting. But when we're just starting out, we just don't really want to do that unless it's a statement like that that we already typed. Okay, my whining about copying and pasting is over. Now, the next thing that I want is a \n. We saw already that goes to a new line. These escape sequences actually relate back to typewriters because remember, computers replace typewriters. Sometimes it helps to look back at the historical aspect to understand why things are done a certain way. On a typewriter, you had to push the tab button to make that mechanism move across the piece of paper, across the physical piece of paper. We still want things to adjust alignment in a certain way, so we use that same mentality. A new line was a little different. On a typewriter, if you wanted the carriage to roll to a new line, you had to press a certain key. If you wanted it to go back to beginning of column 1, it was a different key. So we'll see that there are separate escape sequences for a new line versus a carriage return to go back to column 1. So we can control all of that kind of great stuff. So we want to go to a new line, and then we want this message, special thanks goes out to, let's run it. We're adding slowly. And when you're developing, you have the choice of running step by step like this. In this case, we can because our code is allowing it. Sometimes it's a little harder, but you also have the choice of just writing all the code and then running it once. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there about beginning software developers, and a lot of them say, just run your code, just try it. They say so many people will type it and they'll be like, now what should I do? Run it, run it. If you get an error, we'll figure it out. But if we don't try, we don't even know if it's going to work or not. Okay, so this next line is going to be about a hairstylist. My hairstylist, Henry. Now, Henry likes to be called the Great. So we're going to put an escape character / and then a single quote and put the Great, period, and then another escape sequence and a single quote. Now we saw earlier that Python would actually take care of that for us. without us using the escape sequences. So we can do it either way. Now, after we have the great, we're going to keep going. Who never says, and then we're going to escape to do a double quote. Escape to do a single quote. Then escape to do our double quote. Finally, we're going to close our string with our final double quote and our parenthesis. So let's take a look at this one. If we were color-coded a little bit differently, we would see that our entire string is this. Everything that's within our two outer double quotes. But within that string, we have some escape sequences. So we want to be able to print some single quotes without it causing us any trouble. And we want the double quotes to show up around the word can't that also contains a single quote. So this is super messy. So let's see if that prints out properly. Ah, there it is. So we should end up with the great having the single quotes around it and the word can't having a single quote in it and the double quotes around it. Did everybody's work okay? You got any sort of error messages? Good job. It's really hard to get those in right. So picky. All right, the next thing they want us to do is sound the system bell. This didn't work for us yesterday. So we were gonna try it at home, and I hadn't last night yet. The last thing I want then is my input statement to do the press any key, or press enter key to exit message. And then we'll try running it. So we didn't hear the alarm, and I don't know if the IT department has our internal alarm disabled or if the Python command doesn't work unless something's set up on your system. They didn't go investigate, but let's try running it. So here's my message about Henry the Great. And then right after that, I do get this little weird character when I try to sound that alarm. So Python tried to do something. And then we've got our blank lines from our \n characters. And then finally, our press the enter key to exit message. Looks good. Everybody's work okay? How's our online people? You guys working okay? I think we're working. All right, that's all I wanted to do together in our chapter 2 book, because I know you guys have just been great at interpreting all of that, but reading through this and typing this code in is really tough with all of the \/ characters and everything. So I think everybody's done a great job. I want you to finish chapter 2 at home as you're going through. You should see a few more assignments. They're going to talk for a little while about this escape sequence fancy credits one that we just did. And then they'll start with the silly strings and keep you moving there with that. Okay, that's great. Let's save everything. What you got?
So I guess my computer didn't save it as Python, it saved it as a weird PyCharm thing. So I have to open it in a different program.
Oh, I'm glad you mentioned that. Okay. I don't know if you guys could hear.
You did the N online.
Do what?
After this little symbol, there's supposed to be a space, then press the enter key to exit, and I have an N above mine.
That little weird thing?
No.
Yeah, like
N,
so.
the actual letter N.
Yeah,
Oh, so the \. Check your \/ and maybe, is it have one or is it missing? Good job. Okay, this question, somebody else had brought it up already, and I wanted to make sure that I don't forget. When you're working with Python code, it can be kind of weird. I'm going to go to my folder. Let me go to my right folder because I only have 5 or 10 120 folders. Okay, so here I am looking at my 120 folder for our class. And I have this Python file. Now, with Windows, we're used to just double clicking on files to open them, right? What happens, let me close out of that. What happens if I just double click on that file? Does it open it right? No, it doesn't. And what's going to happen is if I scroll through and I find idle and I say to use idle to open this program, then it's going to work for a little while, but it still won't work very well. Why? Because we have the Python interpreter and idle both involved in this .py file, and they're not both registered to Windows correctly. And so it just doesn't really create that association the way we want. Because if I open this file, if I double click on this file on my computer at home, my computer at home is just going to start running the Python file, and I'm going to see the output from the program. Other people's computers, depending on what options they chose when they installed and things, are going to do many different things. So the best way to open a Python file is to open the program you'd like to use it in first, and then do file open and go find your Python file. Does that make sense? So I could open it and I could use Visual Studio to edit my Python code. Actually, all of these suggestions are perfectly good places for me to edit Python code, but I've been using idle. And if I try to find idle in here right now, it's going to be a huge mess. So what can we do? Well, I've got an idea. Are you ready? Let's try it. Whenever we're working with Python, we have some different options. And I'm going to show you one. Let me show it to you, and then we'll go from there. I have to get logged on to the right account. Sometimes try to think of which way is the best way to do it. We all love Google, right? Yes, it's me. I could just lie and continue. Okay, with Google, you have this new product called Colaboratory. And what Colaboratory is an environment for Python development. And you know how if you use a Google Doc and your friend is sharing that Google Doc with you, you guys could both type in the Google Doc at the same time? That's how Colaboratory is for Python code. So not only is it a really nice development environment for us to use for Python, but we should be able to share where we could actually have another person, like in our study group, jump right in and work on the same code with us and be able to actually develop it. Now, I wouldn't jump into this right away, but idle is just really hard to handle and can cause a lot of trouble for us over time. Plus, a lot of people are having issues getting things installed at home. Colaboratory will work with the Chromebook. It'll work on your phone. It'll basically work on anything that has an internet connection. So it's kind of nice that it's cloud-based development. So I have this Colaboratory file out here, and I've shared it with you, but you can't get to it yet. First, let me show you a little bit about it. It's called a notebook. So when I open a Colab file, I'm really opening a notebook. So I have these different sections. So I created sections when I was experimenting with it for our Game Over program, our Fancy Credits program, and then our salesperson's commission that we need to write. So don't look at that one yet. But if I look at the Game Over program, I made a section in my notebook for it. Here's the code that we just did. And if I click the play icon right here by my code, it'll run that code and I'll see the output down here. Now, if I go to our Fancy Credits program, again, I can do the same thing. Right now it's showing the output already. I'll clear that and run it, and I can see my output. Okay, so some questions for you. Does that make sense to you that we are just writing the same code in a different place? Do you see how it's just like if you had a text file, it wouldn't matter if you used Notepad or Google Docs or Word or whatever, as long as you got that written. That's what we've got here is just Python code. It doesn't matter where we type it, as long as we are in a place where we can run it and get that Python interpreter to tell us if it was correct or not. So let's try Colaboratory and see if we can get this working. The first thing to do is I want you to, I'm really torn. I think I want you to use your OTC account. So open a new Google tab, or I'm sorry, a Chrome tab. Make sure you're logged off of any sort of Google account that you have. When you open the new Chrome tab, I want you to go to Google Drive, okay? Because Google Drive is going to ask the right questions. So go to Google Drive. On Google Drive, say, use another account. And then we want to create an account for myself. Okay, so here is the key. Here's where we needed to get, and we can't get to this screen if we try Gmail or any of the other apps. What we want is use my current email address instead. Do you see that link? And put in your OTC email address. Now this is going to create a Gmail account using your OTC account. So kind of like your Microsoft OneDrive, you'll have 2 Gmail. But actually we're not creating a Gmail, we're just creating a Google account. Now, after you enter your password and confirm it, it's going to make you activate by sending you an email. And that email will go to your OTC account, so you should be able to find it.
I think I brought up the wrong window through from that the Google Drive page.
It's so easy to just, because I mean, they all look just exactly the same.
Because I tried signing up and it does me to verify the phone number, so that must be a Google account created when it does that. Pretty sure. Yeah, where would I have it?
I left that stuff out. And once you create it, right. You should be okay. Just put that one in. It should be on now. Put that out with you. Okay. What?
How do you feel like we're pretty?
Yeah.
No.
It's still that cool.
Yeah. After like Like, yeah.
Do it myself.
Maybe start by thinking, well, I replied to that email. Try that first.
That might actually help me. Well, like, me thinking
Make a
about
bot where it says, hey,
This is called the internet? We'll start there.
Jesus, yourself. What is the word? Not spicy. What is the word?
Say it.
Hey, check your email.
oh, no,
Did you want me to get one?
no. Go to your
Oh, no, you're good. No, you're all set. Okay, are you getting an email? Good job.
I'm just not very smart at the moment.
You are fine.
We did things.
Sometimes with our technical stuff, it can just get a little crazy. Okay, if you're there, then what we want to do is create a new item. And Colaboratory is not listed, so we're going to have to go to more, and then we're going to have to go connect more apps. Once you get to the connect more apps, you can search. In Colaboratory, it looks like this yellow co icon. Now, you guys, I've gone back and forth on this, I really have. And the reason that I haven't jumped on it right away for us to use it is because this is being used heavily by the scientific community. So people that are doing a lot of number crunching and data analysis and things like that are using Colaboratory. But people keep telling me about how great it is. And we just keep having more and more problems because of different versions of Python, different installs at home, people not being able to do things. And I thought, this is crazy. We're just going to go with this way, and we'll see how it works. Colaboratory is based on a concept called a Jupyter Notebook. A Jupyter Notebook is an open source set of information, code, data, other documentation, all pulled together. And so that's what we're looking at here with Colaboratory, is this notebook type concept. I have too many windows open. So here is one notebook that just talks about different features of Colaboratory. So every time we add something into our notebook, we can add a section header, we can add code, and we can add text. That's basically all. In this particular example, they've added some Python code. Then they've said, oh, wow, this is really cool too. When you're running in Colaboratory, you actually have your own virtual machine. So you could use operating system commands to do things. You can put HTML and other code embedded into your Colab notebook and all sorts of great things. So let's use it for Python. Now that we have Colaboratory added, we should be able to add a new Colab notebook. So new Google Colaboratory. And once you create your new Colaboratory, it looks just like a Google Doc. Up here at the top, you have the title for your Colab notebook. So let's change this title. What do we want our heading to be? I'll make it be, for our first one, Chapter 3. Now, right there where the number 1 is ready for me to start typing some Python code. So if everybody's there, not there?
Colab's not popping up, even though I.
No, this is not, no.
Did I ask you to verify your phone number?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just did it.
Let's close it. And let's refresh.
Typically, we ask like for like another.
Everybody else has come up okay?
I got messed up. I
Got
didn't
messed up?
bring my phone.
Okay.
Yeah.
So is it
Sure.
sent it to you?
I verified the email address, and then I needed it on my phone. It's doing a double check. The email, and then it's on the phone. Everyone else said they had to do the same thing.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm just asking.
So go ahead and bring it idle now, that's more on the screen.
Okay.
And then that way you'll still have it, because we don't need it to be in Colaboratory. Everybody else is okay? Good. Okay, yeah, so anytime if one of the tools doesn't work, we can always use one of our other tools. So what I'd like to do is write our salesperson's commission program. And we had pseudocode for that. Let me get it open. Now this is a text file, so I could click plus text and add it to Colaboratory, but I don't want to do that quite yet because I just want to get my Python code in here first. So I'm going to be doing a little bit of different things than what we've done so far. Remember this one, our commission amount, we had just a couple of variables that were numeric, our sales amount and our commission earned. And then we had a commission rate that was an integer. We prompt for the sales amount and the commission rate. We use those two numbers to calculate the commission, and then we output the commission. So this is written in pseudocode, but we can take the pseudocode and change it to be our Python code pretty easily. That'll involve us using functions, those subprograms, and our Python book hasn't shown us how to do that yet. So we'll have to kind of fly a little bit above our book. We can handle it. All right, so let's start this thing. First of all, I have to write my comments. So I'm going to put my comments in. So this script will be salesperson commission. Let me see if I can zoom in a little bit. There's another thing that's much better. So I've got my salesperson's commission and the developer, and our date is today. Bless you. And our purpose is calculate a commission. Okay, yell at me if you have trouble. All right, so I've got my comments in. I'm going to declare my variables. And when I'm working with this kind of environment where I want subprograms, I want modules, I have to be concerned about whether my variables are available to all of those modules or not. And one way that I can be sure that my variables are available is by making them global. A global variable is one that's available to any module. In Python, I use the keyword global to declare a variable as global. yesterday I mentioned to the class that Python likes variable names to start with lowercase letters. I also teach C#, which likes a lot of things to start with uppercase letters. So if you see me making a variable name start with an uppercase letter or something like that, just say, hey, is that what you wanted to do? Because somebody stopped me yesterday and we would have had all of these variable names in uppercase, and they really need to start with lowercase because that's the way Python programmers like to do it. Because we can make all these rules, we can break them, but it's nice for us to follow the rules that others have already kind of established. So we'll do that. Okay, so I have a sales amount. Now, when I'm declaring a global variable in Python, I can't give it any initial value. So Python is going to figure out what the data type is of this variable when I try to use it. I'm also going to have my commission earned, and then my commission rate. So since I don't really need to declare variables in Python, if I make a typo, I might not get an error. I might just get unexpected results because Python will just figure it out. All right, so I have my 3 variables. Now, the first module in our pseudocode is our input module. We're going to prompt our users for input. So to declare a function or a module in Python, I use the def keyword, define. And I want to define a module named input mod. So a couple more things about that. My def keyword is required. After that is the name of my module. After that, I have a pair of open and close parentheses and a colon. We'll talk more about what goes in those parentheses later, but for right now, we'll just have to have that pair of opening and closing parentheses. The colon tells Python that this is the beginning of a body, a statement that has a body. Now, when I press enter, you'll see that I'm going to be automatically indented because that colon indicated there's a body that's going to come after this statement. And in Python, anything that is a body of code is indented under the heading. So all of the code that goes with this module will be indented under it. All right, so let's write our code here. First of all, we want to get our sales amount. And to get a value for our sales amount, we're going to ask the user for input. The prompt that we're going to give them is please enter the sales amount. So we've used the input statement before, but we just used it to like halt the screen. Now we're going to use it to actually request data. So whenever this line of code runs, the user is going to type the information. The information is going to be saved in the variable sales amount. Now, we also wanted to prompt our users for input for the commission rate. So I'll use its variable name and I'll say, what is the commission rate? Now my sales amount and my commission rate are both global variables, and I want the data values in those variables to be available to any of our functions, any of our subprograms. So I actually have to tell Python about them again. I have to say in this input module, the global sales amount is going to be updated and the global commission rate is going to be updated. So that's kind of a special thing that's not part of our pseudocode, but we have to put it in our Python code because we're using global variables. Now, if I didn't put that global term in my function everything would work through this part, but then my modules that want to read these variables would not be able to because they wouldn't be global. Let's run this. I'm going to click the Run Cell button. And it's kind of slow, especially the first time it runs something. It's building up that virtual machine for you and saving your code and everything. And what I get finally is like nothing, but that's good. That's what I wanted. So I know that I didn't have any sort of errors. It didn't do anything, but that's okay because I haven't done anything yet. So how can I get it to use my input module? Well, I have to run it. So I'm in a backspace. So I'm in column 1, and I'm going to put the line of code, run my input module. And that's all I need to say to run my input module. In my pseudocode, I had to have that keyword call, but with Python, I don't. I just put the name of the module, and if it starts in column 1, Python will run it.
So if input mod, could I call that anything else? Like, could I say first mod or something
Sure,
like
you
that?
can name it anything you wanted.
But it's just telling, so you put it at the bottom, input mod is because it's saying, hey, run this thing.
Right, run this thing.
Okay.
And the way that, that's really good. And the way the Python interpreter works, it's reading from top to the bottom. So we can't run something until it's already been deffed, until it's already been defined.
So if we had multiple things, you know, like would we put a comma or would we just go down to a new line and put?
It depends on what things you have.
Probably
So,
later on.
yeah. Hang on to that one. Okay, so now we should see our prompts come up because we're actually running our input module. Let's try it. We should see, please enter the sales amount. I'll put in like 2,000. And then what is the commission rate? Now notice I slid over a little bit. I've got a scroll bar somewhere. I can scroll back over. What is the commission rate? Let's say 20. Okay, nothing happens because I don't have any more code in yet, but it's ran my input statements. Okay, now take a look. My numbers are shoved right up against those prompts. That doesn't look very good. What can I do to keep that from happening? Space. So I'll put a space at the end of these prompt strings. That should look better. And then I might want to be more consistent, like please enter the sales amount colon, you know, please enter the commission rate colon or something like that. So any sort of consistency like that, your users are going to appreciate. All right, so we wrote our first function. We have everything going here really, really good. So now I need another function. And in our pseudocode, we said the next function we were going to have is our calc function. And all we're going to do in our calc function is calculate that commission earned. All right. So I want to put this def statement right after my input module. Def calc. So this new function is called calc. As soon as Python sees a line of code that's not indented, it knows our input module has ended. Notice how that works. We didn't have to say end of input module or anything like that. Just as soon as we were dedented. Like, oh, okay, that one's over. Now, what do we need to do in our calculation? Well, we're going to update that global variable commission amount. Earned. So I've got to put that global keyword and then our formula. Commission earned is equal to our sales amount times our commission rate divided by 100. So you can see it's got some auto completion capabilities, kind of like that Notepad++ did, where we can press enter and let it enter code for us instead of typing everything. Now, after I run the input mod, I'll go ahead and run the calc. Oops, I have an uppercase C there and it needs to be lowercase. Now let's run it. We should get prompted for our sales amount and our commission. Oh, and then I've got a problem. Did you guys have that problem?
Yes.
Mean and ugly, huh? What's it saying?
Wants to know what type. I just blanked.
That's right. It says it's a type error.
Yeah, someone needs to know if it's a string, integer, or float.
What line of code is it on that it's canceling on?
17.
In mine, it's 17. I'm not sure if yours. So it's saying something about this calculation, right? It's got it all highlighted for us. It's saying that it cannot do math on a string. Well, we didn't tell Python those were strings, did we? We sort of did. When we do the input statement, we are saying we're going to input a string. So we want to cast that string as something else, a different type. Python is saying anything that's input is a string. We're going to say, no, cast it as an integer, see if it will fly. Let's try it. To cast it as an integer, I can just wrap it in the int function. And when I say wrap it in a function, I'm going to put the function name in an open parenthesis, and then I'm going to close the parenthesis at the very end of the line. So now I've wrapped this input statement by the int cast function to say take that and make it an integer. Now I could do it a different way. Let's do it differently with our commission rate. With our commission rate, we'll try the cast. We'll say commission rate equals int commission rate. And either one of those will do the same thing. But in the end, we'll end up with an integer. So we can cast our input statement, or we can cast our variable. Does that make sense? There's two choices. Now, no matter which way we use, we should have made both of those variables be integers now as far as Python is concerned. So we should be able to do some math with them. Let's run and see if that's true. So here it's asking me for my sales amount and my commission rate. And now I ended without crashing. So big difference, huh? Even though we don't see any difference in our output, we know that that math calculation worked.
It didn't crash.
It didn't crash. No news is good news.
Can you go back here? And think?
Sure.
Be fine.
There. Is that what you needed to?
Yeah.
What did you?
So I just did them differently.
Yeah. But it wasn't that involved.
Yeah, you had So yeah, when I show you these two different ways of doing it, I know different people like to do things in a different way. My mind, my brain works better with this simplified approach down here. Engineering type brains that are construction oriented and things like that, they like this better where they're having less code and more functionality happening all at once. So different, it's okay. Either way is fine.
Sorry, I'm having another error.
Oops, sorry. I'll fall right in your lap. Oh, 15.
Was that change?
That's silly. And you know, every time I start these, I think, oh, I'm gonna abbreviate commission. And then I'm like, no, it's just too many opportunities for typos. We gotta keep it long. So let's try some. We don't have a bunch of time, but let's make a couple errors. Let's do our output module first, and then we'll try a couple of errors so that errors aren't so awful. The last function we had in our program is our output mod. So I want that to go here with all of my functions, def output mod. And it's going to do a print statement. And we wanted to print a nice heading, the commissioned earned is. And I'm going to do a comma and commission earned. Now down here where I'm calling my modules, I could just add in that call for the output module, but all of our stuff has said we need a main module. So let's add that in, output mod. But all three of these module calls need to be within a main module. So I'm going to indent them all with the tab key because I don't want to use the space or I can get Python really upset about a mixture of spaces and tabs. All this code will be right and it won't work. Now the last thing I need to do is execute my main module. So then this Python method of kind of thinking upside down, right? We have to kind of start at the end of our program and say, well, here's all of our modules. Here's our main that calls all of our modules. And finally, here's the line of code that runs the main. So all of our modules have to be defined before our main can find them to run. So let's try it now. We should have everything. Oops, it's mad at me. I didn't put parentheses. Okay, so please enter the sales amount. I'll put in 2,000. What's my commission rate? 10. Okay, the commission earned is 200. So that looks right. Everybody's work? No? What you got?
There you go.
Got it? That fixed it. Okay, let's break it. You've got it working. Let's try some things. We've done a few things as we've gone unintentionally, right? One that's a big one is, what if I put an uppercase C here where I call my calc module? Does that matter? Let's try it. It asks me, and then it crashes. So case sensitive? You bet. Python's super case sensitive. So uppercase letters have to match. Lowercase letters have to match. All the letters have to match. So I'll change that back to a lowercase c. Now I already showed you what happens if we leave the parentheses off of our call. Python goes, I don't even know what you're doing. What about some other things? Let's try, what if I leave out this global statement? I'll make it a comment like it's not even there. Let's see what happens then. It asks me for my sales amount. It asks me for my commission rate, like everything's fine. It seemed like it handled it okay. Can I get rid of all of those? Does this version of Python with our Colaboratory not need those statements? That would be wonderful. Sometimes we can actually find changes like that to Python. Looks like it was okay either way. So let's try some other errors. Well, how would we know these things if we didn't try, right? Let me try getting rid of this one. If we can get rid of those, that'll really save a lot of trouble. Yes. Are you thinking?
Is it because we already did the INT to define them?
Up here, it should be.
Well, and the def input mod, you know, we did the sales amount INT, and then we did that, so couldn't we get rid of those top two globals since now we've already defined it as.
We should be able to, but you've never been able to before. It was just a weird thing with Python that you had to have those statements.
Okay.
Do what? What's it do? If I change my numbers? So it's keeping those variable contents because they were so global that it was keeping them forever. So if I go to 40,000 and 10, still 200. So that's a thing with Colaboratory. So we have to be super careful. So not only did I make it look like I don't need those global things anymore, I was getting the wrong impression, right? Not only did it make it look that way, I could have really messed things up on down the road because it was just retaining those old values that I'd already put in. So if I closed this notebook and reopened it, then all of a sudden I would have no results whatsoever because I didn't have global variables. So interesting things for us to try is we're working with things. Now I'm going to put those back. But I love that example because so often I've seen students over the years who were in their room experimenting with something because so many students have done such a great job about trying to teach themselves things. And sometimes they can get onto something like that and be absolutely sure A leads to B, and it's really not that way. It's just that all of the circumstances have made it look that way. But as developers, we get to figure that kind of stuff out. Okay, so some other important things. We saw that case mattered when we're talking about module names. What if I accidentally use an uppercase I to call this input function? First of all, my color coding goes away. So hopefully that will kind of help me as I get used to things. But then when I run it in Colab, I'm going to get a nice underline that says there's something wrong. And if I scroll down, it's giving me a name error. And it's saying, it's finally pointing to that line of code. And it says, input is not defined. So it's actually somewhat helpful. So I'll go back and make that a lowercase I. So notice it doesn't say, you have input with an uppercase I. I know what input with a lowercase I is. Is that what you meant? It's not that smart. It's only able to tell you that it can't figure it out. Now let's try some other ones. What if I have my commission earned backspaced over here? Notice it's not an error right away. I should do something better. Our program here doesn't help with that very much because what happened was it just went ahead and ran that commission earned calculation. So you can see Python can be really, really helpful and figure out a lot for you, or it can be really, really frustrating and cryptic with the errors. We don't have a lot of time. There's one thing I'd like to do really quick. Let's start a Word document. Open Word for me. And in Word, I'd like to create a Python quick reference. Because when you search Google, you're going to find all sorts of Python resources. Many, 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 many of them. And some of them are going to be really, really over your head. Some of them aren't going to have anything to do with the way we're using Python. So it's nice if we have our own. So let's just start this today. And then we'll add more to it. So I went into the header to put Python quick reference. If you're in the 101 class and you're just learning about Word, that's okay. We're going to insert a table. And I just want my table to be 2 columns. I'll just make it a couple wide. Now, when I type things in Word, you know it's going to autocorrect. So I'm going to put print, then hello world. Now I'm going to go back to the P and change it to a lowercase p, because Word will only autocorrect it for me once. And after I change it again, it'll leave it alone. So when we're doing our quick reference, we could turn off that autocorrect in Word and all that, but it would be a real pain. We'll just fight back. So let's say in our other column then, this will output hello world. So we could do another line, print, just open and close parenthesis, say output a blank line. So any way that is meaningful to you in your quick reference to keep this information is what I want you to put in here. For next time, continue reading through that chapter in the Python programming book, and you have an assignment for the Python Code Academy. Python Code Academy, you're going to find the free Python course, which uses Python 2.7. That's an old release. The only difference is when you do a print statement in Python 2.7, you won't have parentheses. Okay? So as you're going through that Code Academy course, your print statements will not have parentheses. Ours will. The other assignment is to do the supermarket program that you guys did the pseudocode and flowchart for last week. Now that's for your study group, for you alone. So if you want to work on it on your own and then get with your study group and make sure everybody's got it all working, that would be good. So do stay in touch with me on Discord if you have questions. I wish we had like 5 more minutes, but that's all right. We've got a lot accomplished today. Now, if you get home and you're confused, send me a message and say, what was the difference between this thing and that thing? Because we did a lot, and a lot today. Take this class that's so good and say, what about all of this stuff? So yell if you're confused.
On the Code Academy assignment, you wanted a Word document answering those questions and then pictures.
All I need now is just a screen.
Oh, is that all you need?
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah, I
Okay.
changed it from being questions to just being more of a think about these things.
Okay. Will it hurt if I just leave the one?
No, that'll be fine. Will it let you share your Colab notebook?
Yes.
So if you have one there.
Yeah, to share with people or groups.
Awesome. I forget it yesterday. Share, so I was really worried about that. You guys get out of here. Let me know if you have any questions, and we'll keep going with all of our quick reference. Any questions from our online people? You guys are awesome.
Share. Okay, cool.
Yay!
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna close it. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, just.